Hello. Here in the studio, Music Unraveled number 4, the Avett Brothers. And I'm back in the studio with Booty. He's going to be relaying. He just went and saw the Avett Brothers. Was the last weekend, I believe.
For the sixth time.
For the sixth time,
Yeah,
okay.
although that seems like a lot, that's not necessarily a lot for Avett Brothers fans or go to the fanatics.
Yeah, isn't it
even.
crazy how huge they've gotten? Probably since the first time you saw them and now.
Yes, most definitely. Because I saw them for the first time, which I'm sure we'll talk about at some point, but just before I Am Lovin' You hit, which was their breakthrough album in terms of, jumping into kind of a different level as a band.
Yeah. So how long have you... I heard about the Avett Brothers first from a different friend that just kind of showed me a couple of videos one time when he was over at my house, and I never really came back to him. And then the more you and I started hanging out, you just you get around people that are passionate about things, and they keep talking about them, and you look into things more that they're passionate about out of curiosity. It's like, well, if I like this guy and this guy likes this much,
there must be some
maybe there's a reason here.
Mm-hmm.
But so you're a big fan. When you start getting into listening to the Avett Brothers?
It's a great place to start because actually, if I even take it a little bit farther than that, the Avett Brothers I really credit. Well, let me back up even farther. For the benefit of those who maybe haven't listened to any of the first Music Unraveled, or at least the two that we did with Todd Snyder and Drive-By Truckers, that but others might not, that I'm big time into the quote-unquote underground music scene as I describe it. Music that musicians and artists that you won't normally hear on the radio, or if you do, even so very rarely, and that the average person on the street has never heard about, to one degree or another. The road warriors, the ones that, pile up in their anywhere from a van with a trailer on the back or even upwards of a nice tour bus with a trailer on the back, but, go from club to club like Rev Room and Stickies and Whitewater and George's Majestic in Fayetteville and places like that. That's the music that I'm generally into. And that I can credit to a large degree to the Avett Brothers, because the Avett Brothers are one of the original bands that I, quote, discovered, right, in 2008, 2009. It must have been like somewhere towards the end of 2008, okay?
The year of our Lord.
It was previous to the release of I Am Lovin' You, which came out sometime in 2009. So when I discovered them because I was looking for music from musicians that I'd never heard of, kind of finding things that I dig, those hidden gems. So I was on Amazon, and I had picked up a couple titles from different artists and was kind of starting my journey into an underground music scene, or what
were you really into before you got into the underground scene? I haven't asked you that really much since we've been hanging out.
That's a really large question, but I can probably narrow it down to this. I was, as a teenager, I was kind of like you in the sense that I was always into live music and listening to music all the time, but I was a teenager in the 80s, so, my crew didn't tend to like at that time the hair bands and, just the commercialized stuff that was coming out then. I'm not saying it's all bad, but we just weren't into it. And so we reverted back to 60s and 70s music, Pink Floyd and Led Zeppelin and The Doors and, all that kind of stuff.
Did you see my Facebook status about Led Zeppelin?
I did, yes. That shocked me, and I'd like to look more into that.
No, I'm sorry.
It's okay. At any rate, so after my teenage years, when I, had to get a job and start supporting myself and all that, I kind of tended to get out of that scene, and I got out of the music scene also for a while. And then sometime in my 20s, right about the time that CDs became a thing, right, I started getting back into music again at that point, and I was interested in, as I ended up being in my third phase, looking for bands that that I hadn't heard of before, that I don't generally know, or the average person doesn't know. And discovered a whole bunch of bands there, and I had built up a huge collection of CDs, and then went through a dark time in my life and became convinced that I needed to just shed all of my material possessions, and I sold all my CDs. I just got rid of them all, and gave them away or sold them. and then got out of the music scene again. And so this, when I discovered the Avett Brothers, was my third round of deciding to start exploring what's going on now. And that came in 2008-ish. So you asked me previous, I'd have to go all the way back to my college days, my early college days, actually, which has been too many years ago to mention at this point. But to the Avett Brothers, then. I had gotten a few albums or whatever from bands, I couldn't even tell you who. And on Amazon, you know how they have the scroll below customers who bought this also like this, or also bought that. And I found so many great artists, and have since found so many great artists through those very means. In essence, same thing you were talking about. If you hear me talking about Avett Brothers, well, maybe I should check out the Avett Brothers. If I see other people who like this music, looking at this, well, maybe I should take that music. And it just Avett Brothers kept coming up and kept coming up and kept coming up. I ignored it for a while because I don't know why, I just did. It just kept coming up. And I was like, okay, maybe I ought to check into this band. And so I bought, as my first album, Four Thieves Gone, the Robinsonville Sessions, which was put out in 2006. And when I listened to that, which is one of their really, it's one of their albums that has a very kind of a raw feel to it, almost on the spot kind of, almost as if many of the songs they recorded, directly into the microphones to the tape. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And when I heard that, it was just blew my mind, and I was like, oh my God, who are these guys, and why have I not been listening to them for years now? And that's when I started delving into some of their older stuff, Mignonette and Emotionalism. And
that was a big album. That had 17 tracks on that album too.
On Four Thieves Gone.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's I finally did pick it up on vinyl, and it's a double LP set. Got it on white wax, man.
Nice.
Very, very limited edition.
Vinyl
I found
is
it at a
back
concert
right
one
now,
night.
man. It's crazy. Everybody's talking about it too.
On what?
Just vinyl.
Oh, yeah.
Like we're like, good thing
podcast.
you did sell your CDs, because like there's this thing now that's called like disc rot or something.
Oh, yeah.
Like the
Discogs?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically these like little holes that are wearing through the CD.
CDs,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
That's been around for a while. I started noticing that disc rot on CDs probably a good 10 years ago. They start discoloring.
Yes.
It kind of looks almost like a mold beneath the surface of the CD.
Weird.
Anyway,
moving on.
When I heard Four Thieves Gone, and especially Talk on Indolence, which is one of their staples that they play live, I was blown away, and so I started looking more deeper into them. And it was then shortly after that I Am Lovin' You popped, was released. And when I then heard I Am Lovin' You, I just absolutely fell in love with the band, full scale, full tilt, all in.
Dude, where are they from?
North Carolina.
Okay.
Specifically Charlotte area. I don't think
a lot of history up there.
Yeah,
over there.
Yeah. American Aquarium is from North Carolina, Raleigh, North Carolina also, which is another band that I found, post Avett Brothers. But Avett Brothers, at my point being kind of when I fell in love with the Avett Brothers, I really fell in love with the journey of finding more bands that I could fall in love with like that again. And that led to American Aquarium, and that led to the Truckers, and that led to Snyder, and so on and so on and so on. Also, by the way, was the same year that I first saw them, 2008.
Oh, nice.
So I saw them, actually, this is a funny story in and of itself, but and do make me come back to Four Thieves Gone. I had just been through as I just mentioned, Four Thieves Gone, and then starting to look into some of their other stuff and really digging it, right? Some of their older stuff. And all of a sudden, I got a notification, Avett Brothers, special performance just announced, and it's in like 2 weeks, up at Harding College in Northeast Arkansas. It was some sort of, I guess they put on, the Harding College puts on every year a kind of a student appreciation party, and it culminates in this big concert. And they brought Dr. Dog, which you and I are going to be seeing soon.
Yes.
They brought them in one year. This was post.
Harding is the most expensive university in the state.
No kidding. Well, maybe that's
in terms of tuition. They're a Church of Christ college, and
even though the University of Ozarks in Clarksville.
As far as I know, they were more expensive. Last time I checked, it's been a couple of years. They were more expensive per credit hour than U of A. So
I think University of Ozarks is
they're on up there too. Yeah, but I don't know. But both of them are private institutions too. So yeah, they got the money to bring in whoever they want, I'm sure.
Well, true. Although this was just pre I Am Loving You. So the album had not been released yet. It released, I don't remember exactly what month, but in the following year. So this show came up because...
2009, yeah.
Yeah, this show came up because I don't know why they'd only announced it like very shortly. It may have been more than 2 weeks. It's been several years ago, but it wasn't long. I mean, it was a surprise announcement, right? So the word didn't really get out there very far. And so I was like, hell yeah, Avett Brothers, and Connie and I, my wife, and I went to it, bought tickets for it, and I got early access because back in those days, they had the thing where if you were the first 50 ticket buyers, you get early access, which means you get to go in the doors before everybody else does, which allows you to get a good spot. And so when we went up there, I was kind of expecting it to be, you imagine a concert, lines and whatnot. It's like, nobody there. We were kind of, are we in the right place? What's going on? Ended up getting to go walking in and right up to the stage, very first time, standing right in front of Scott Avett this time with the very few other people that were there with us. Now, ultimately, the stadium not the stadium, but the arena, the little fairly small arena, did fill up, but that's when all the students came, right? Mm-hmm. And then, let's see, I was leading this somewhere. Where was I going?
We were you got right up to the stage.
Right. Okay. So that was the first time I got to see them. Was at this very kind of small-ish venue, directly on the rail, right in front of Scott Avett, and both my wife Connie and I were just absolutely jaw dropped by the end of the show. I mean, they put on, they're just high energy, constant from the second they come out there until the second they go off that stage. And not only that, not only they're high energy, they're very interactive with the crowd, interactive with each other, very personal. It felt like a very personal experience, even though it was in a larger venue than that is, typical for the venues I go to in most cases. They just had an innate an innate sense of how to truly connect with the audience in a very honest way. Not in a staged way, not in a forced way, not even in, maybe not even in a planned way, I'm not sure, but in an authentic way. And so at that point, I don't like the term favorite bands because ask me on any given day what my favorite band is, it could be something completely different. But I rank them among my favorite to my heart. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. That I hold them up. If somebody says, okay, if I put a gun to my head and say, okay, you better tell me now what band is your favorite.
It's the Avett Brothers.
It would be the Drive-By Truckers, Avett Brothers, Todd Snyder. Okay.
Which are our first 3 episodes together.
I'd have to say those like really fast, like Drive-By Truckers, Avett Brothers, Todd Snyder. That band is my favorite. Now you can take the gun away from my head, please.
They should all form a super group.
They ought to. And so when I Am Loving You came out, that is really when they jumped to the next level. So I kind of came in like right underneath the radar of the time in which they were generally unknown into the time in which they were a little less generally unknown. Until now, they're not, still relatively unknown, but they've gotten to the next level.
Yeah, definitely. I kind of
they fill Red Rocks.
Yeah,
they sell it out. They sell out Madison Square Garden on New Year's Eve.
That's impressive.
They do that every year.
Well, they're getting more radio play now.
Yeah, maybe I don't listen to the radio.
I've heard them on the radio because some of their newer songs off their last album, it was the first album that I had of theirs, if I'm not mistaken. You might have given me the album we're talking about right
True
now.
Sadness? Their most recent album?
Yes. Yeah, but I can't remember if... I think you might have given me...
I gave you
Love
Four
and
Thieves Gone, too.
I think you gave me a whole... I want to say you gave me all of them.
Yeah, it's very possible.
Yeah.
I have.
I've surfed through them driving on the catalog, and I've listened to them. I mean, I've got their albums up on Spotify. That's what we're talking. They have a lot of drops. They had before that Four Thieves album, they had 4 albums out. So since 2002, I didn't know they'd been around that long.
11 major releases. That includes 2 EPs. I call those. I consider those major, even though they're shorter, because they contain some of their best songs, in my opinion. And when I say that, by the way, I mean that some of their best songs, of which all their albums contain, some of their best songs are also on those albums, on those EPs. And then they have, I think, 4. This is maybe kismet that we're doing this as a 4th show, because they have 4 live albums.
Man, I love live albums.
Me too.
Panic's live albums are so good. I mean, it's just they have more live albums out than studio on some of their stuff.
True, although Panic being a jam band, and Fish is the same way too, that the studio albums are, in some ways at least, just kind of what they put out so that they have songs to actually play in totally different ways on stage.
Yeah, that's a great way to think. Yeah, that's a great way to look at it.
They're almost like you collect the studio albums just because you're a fan and you want to have their music, but it's the live versions that really are the only ones we listen to, right?
Yeah, I mean, really, like I have a Panic playlist on Spotify, and most of the versions I have maybe 2 or 3 studio songs on there. It's just because there's not a good live version on there, but they have. One place I saw they had 37 total albums, and most of them are live. Panic. I think they have like maybe 10 or 12 studio albums. The rest of them are like more live than studio.
It's interesting because I'm the same way in that I love live albums of bands that I know. Usually, not always, but typically, and this is probably not the case with bands like, full-scale jam bands like Widespread Panic and Fish and Grateful Dead and a few others, but String Cheese Incident, a few others, but where those you can experience those even if you don't know the songs, that you can still like totally get into it and love it. Whereas oftentimes I find with bands, more traditional, I guess, bands like the Avett Brothers, for example, traditional meaning not jam bands, more traditional, who go up and perform their songs on stage with some variation, but not nearly the extent of a jam band. That if I don't know their music, that it's harder for me to appreciate the live performance.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. Like, the first time I saw Rusted Root, I didn't really know. And ironically, Panic. The first time I saw either one of those bands, I've only seen Root once. I would love to see them again. But I didn't really know any of their songs. And the Rusted Root, I think their very last song they played was Send Me On My Way.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, these guys? I know this song. Song. Such a happy song, too. But, which they killed it. They were just so energetic in the performances. Right. So I think we've talked about this on a previous podcast. You go, and the live show blows you away, and you're like, I want that album.
Yes.
And you buy the album, and you put it in your CD player when you get back to the truck, and you're like,
right, this isn't what I remember.
This is not what it sounded like.
Yes, there is that. The live performance is absolutely essential.
But that's what you were saying on that Avett Brothers album, though. You kind of sounded kind of raw or like a live performance. Is that what you're alluding to?
Well, I was alluding more to the musical style, I guess. Yeah. But what I was alluding to in this is that not seeing them live. I'm talking about listening to a live album. If I don't, for some bands, if I don't know their music, if I listen to a live album before I know their music, that oftentimes I don't really connect with the live album as much, right?
Yeah.
But I when I know the music, or when it's a band that doesn't really require it, like Widespread Panic, I agree with you 100%. The live albums are absolutely the way to go.
Even I'm fascinated when I hear about. So you said that the Four Thieves ones was maybe the first one, the first album you kind of plugged into, but that I would like to see how long it took them to record it. Because I've been seeing a weird correlation between a lot of different bands. They'll go in and record an album in like a day or a weekend or a week.
Yeah.
And it's like...
And some of them take a year.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it comes with the engineering after the fact.
Yeah, and
And that's, by the way,
tracks.
that's, by the way, what I meant by raw in the Four Thieves Gone. I think, and they intended this. I mean, I'm not in their head, so I don't know exactly the full story, but that's what they were going for. Is more of a direct and more of a immediate sound, and it has kind of a much. They've always had a punk element to them. The Avett Brothers, for those who've never listened to them at all, are really, really difficult to define what genre they fall into. The best probably genre, I guess, name would be Americana, which they do certainly fit the bill for Americana band. And what Americana means, which I hate that name because most people who haven't heard that term before or don't know that that genre and the bands within it, or they get plugged in within it. Think, the kind of trashy, trinket kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, let me tell you something
roadside,
funny
kind
on
of
this
booger
too.
holla kind of stuff.
A lot of maybe my audience, depending on who I personally know that listens to this, there's also a jiu-jitsu submission named the Americana.
No kidding.
Yes.
And tell me, what is that?
It's a shoulder submission where your arm is like this. So, if audience, I have my arm out, and then it bends at my elbow and goes up 90 degrees.
Yeah, it's kind of like you're doing
beside my body. Yeah, it's like almost like an arm wrestling.
Right on, brother.
Yeah, like flexing my bicep, like flexing my muscle.
Solid.
So, but they just take your shoulder and they crank it backwards.
Oh,
yeah,
that hurts.
I know, right?
Do it myself.
Imagine somebody's doing that with
now,
both their arms.
Why do they call that the Americana?
I have no idea.
I've
never really looked it up. Right? Honestly, it's probably like a folk wrestling term. A lot of moves from mixed martial arts and jiu-jitsu have come from old catch wrestling and folk wrestling terminology, or judo. Okay. So it's interesting. It's a hodgepodge.
Yeah, you should look into that origins of that.
I know there's a move called the omoplata. Okay. And I just told somebody today, I was like, that's Portuguese for scapula. And they were like, really? And most of the people.
What does scapula mean?
Yeah, exactly. What's a scapula? It's by the clavicle. Yeah.
The clavicle? Yeah. That'd be a good name for a rock band.
It would.
Americana as a genre really implies a mixture of all kinds of American music, right? Blues and rock and roll and jazz.
It's a good way to describe it, I suppose.
I think it's what it is, right? And punk, right? And soul, and progressive even. I mean, just kind of a conglomeration of all these various forms, kind of. Both in the same song and sometimes through the track.
They even have a bluegrass tone to
that. Bluegrass, that's one I have to add. And country, of course. How could I leave that one out?
Yeah.
A lot of them, a lot of their earlier stuff, and I think this is why some people say, or I've heard a lot of people say, and you might or might not agree, but that they like their older stuff better, or that with I Am Loving You, which is when they started. With producer Rick Rubin, who's produced their last 4 albums. I Am Loving You, The Carpenter, Magpie and the Dandelion, and True Sadness, and who is now producing their 5th album. And I think this is the last Rick Rubin album they're planning. That's what they seem to suggest on stage.
What did you say, the very first one?
March 2nd.
He worked with them on
I Am Loving You.
Okay.
In 2009. And that's the one, again, that brought him to kind of the next level.
Rick Rubin's worked with the Chili Peppers a lot early in their career.
Yeah, he's worked with so many, And he has his own label, The American, which, he worked with Johnny Cash. He did the American recordings, which are my favorite Johnny Cash recordings from his entire career.
Have you been to the museum in Nashville?
No.
Man, have you been to Nashville?
I've not. I've been through Nashville. I've not ever been able.
We just went for the first time last year and saw. That's where we saw Roger Waters.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and
so you got some time to go.
We went to we didn't go to the Grand Ole Opry, but man, I'm wanting to go back. It is going to be like a pretty. I'm not going to be able to hit that Dead show I was telling you about. We're thinking about going to see the Dead in Colorado.
It's a long drive.
It is, but man, we're trying to find the right date, right time, right show at Red Rocks again. something that's just really going to be over. I want to see Panic at Red Rocks real bad.
That would be an experience.
Yeah, and which they have more sold out shows at Red Rocks than any other band.
Yeah.
So, or it'd be cool to see the Dead in Boulder, but we had some sort of weird schedule conflict come up already.
Yeah, that always happens. Well, I shouldn't say it always happens, but it happens too often.
Well, so you see the Memphis,
like for example, work.
Memphis in May docket's up right now. I don't know if you ever go to that little music.
Oh
festival.
yeah, I've. It's been years and years, but I don't generally because I generally don't tend to prefer festivals. I like the smaller, more intimate, more shows that are based or focused on a singular artist, or if you're lucky enough, two artists. For example, I'm seeing Deer Tick and John Moreland co-headlining at Rev Room in April.
Did you see that Marie Lepanto show yet? Did you go to that?
No, I didn't, but they're coming back in April to two shows, one up in Springfield and then another one in Springfield, Missouri.
Yeah.
And then another one towards the end of the month in Little Rock. And I'm definitely going to be hitting one of those. Did you listen to that album?
Yeah.
It's pretty good, isn't it?
Yeah, I would maybe go see them. Are they doing a living room show?
Yeah. Both of those two that I just mentioned are living room shows.
Man, let me know on that Little Rock one.
I will.
And maybe I would like to make that work because, man, too, like, this kind of interesting. Like I joked about it for the podcast, but I kind of like see this like a little mini job now. Like I have to go consume some good music. So I have content for the podcast.
I hear you.
And the concert reviews are great. So it's like, I don't know, it just gives it an extra purpose. I'm sad I didn't go to the Avett Brothers. If Cora would not have been out of town, I definitely could have pulled that off.
Yeah.
And she gave her blessing, but I did 7 private lessons that day, dude.
I knew you had a lot with Cora had her thing going, and you had your thing going, and I knew that was going to be hard to arrange.
Yeah.
But,
well, thanks for the invite. I'm glad that she got to go.
Well, and it was one of those, if Brian can't go, I'll go with you. That was a Friday night show in Tulsa, and that's really tough for her.
I really appreciate that.
And by the way, I should, even though she probably won't listen to this, thanks, Connie. I'll give her thanks for sacrificing her not only her time but her energy, what little of it she had left.
Well, yeah, it's at the end of the week, man. It's always like, because that was like another thing I was like,
especially in Tulsa, because I have to like pick her up at right when she gets off
work.
Well,
that was with me. I was like, well, I could work all day, and then I could cut it off right at 4:30, and then we could leave right away. And then I was like, because I started the day, I was teaching at 5:30 a.m. and just went all day. But so I was like, nah.
Yeah.
And I would have had to cancel my last couple of sessions. So it worked out, though. But
there'll be another opportunity. They come around here at least once a year.
If it would have been like Little Rock
twice a year,
or even Fayetteville, I would have been all over it. I was like, man, and I didn't want to crash out on you on the way home, even though the Steven Wilson had me off in another universe last time we left a concert.
Indeed.
Drooling.
That was the trucker show.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah, man. So, anyway. So, we were at Rick Rubin before we got on that side note, but
yeah. Well, okay, so I was coming kind of back to this, and I do hear a lot of kind of people find division, old Avett Brothers, new Avett Brothers.
Yeah, that seems to be a big narrative.
Yeah, and that's really where it started at the I Am Loving You. And I think it's because, in large part, but not in full part, because the albums were more polished. They were with Ramser Records, small label, for every other release, and it was very personal. I think they were very involved with the production, and, it was that some people would define it at least as being more authentic. Okay, I don't define it that way. I just see it as being different. Some of this might be because I came in right as I Am Loving You was put out, so I hadn't established a strong bond with the Avett Brothers before I Am Loving You came out. So maybe it was more seamless for me.
But I could
interesting
kind of that it's their first commercial break, I guess you could say, and it's their first Rick Rubin album as well.
I mean, the very fact that Rick Rubin was producing right in and of itself gave them a larger audience. Because, Rick Rubin is a very famous producer, has worked with so many big names. And so for him to work with this no-name band, Avett Brothers, automatically created a lot of buzz and a lot of interest. And then their sound, it is true that, I would say that, first of all, that their sound is still very much authentic Avett Brothers, and they still, have the same elements that you see from album one, all the way up to their latest release. But it is true probably that it has more of a certainly polished and more of a pop kind of elements to it.
Yeah, I've heard a few people describe it that way. Just talking about the new album with people, and it does seem to be. And I would, now that we're talking about this, I'm going to go back, and this is great because I'm going to go back and listen to those 4 Rick Rubin albums, and then I'm going to compare them to the older catalog.
Yeah, I'll say this in terms of comparisons. I just find them to be every bit as enjoyable. I love their old stuff. I love all of their stuff. For in different ways, and sometimes for different reasons. For example, The Fourth Thief's Gone being more raw and in your face, and really kind of very kind of strong punk elements in that one, more so than even other albums. And with Mignonette and Emotionalism, both for their kind of fluid sound and their, the way they mix the banjo with the acoustic guitar and their harmonies, the way they harmonize on those albums. Through some of the big ones like Swept Away and escaping titles, but. I find their latest stuff, for example, True Sadness, is one of my favorite Brothers albums, in the sense I think it's one of their best albums. I mean, I find it hard to compare, saying, this is number 1, this is number 2, this is number 3. I find them all to be so unique in their own way. But I would rank True Sadness and I Am Lovin' You up there with their best albums and their best work in terms of the artistic output. Pop, the name itself kind of has bad implications for a lot of people. But even pop music, it's an American style. It's a big part of Americana in one way or another, in one degree or another. But good pop, real pop, honest pop, like Tame Impala, I'd say falls into that category too. It can be, to me, a pleasant and interesting musical journey in and of itself. So I do hear that a lot of times, and unfortunately, I think not everybody, but a lot of people means it as a negative, that they've gone, that it's too pop for me. It's more pop than the old stuff. And they use that as a kind of a diminishment of their newer stuff as worse than their older stuff. I see it as just a progression of the band. And I remember,
that's a great way to
Scott
think about
Avett said, and I'm sure Seth Avett has even said this in one time or another, and I paraphrase him, but he said, I know that there will be fans who won't like some of the directions that we go in as a band. But every direction we go in is true to who we are. And that really shines through for me, both on the stage and in their music as well. They're some of the most, that I love good songwriting. Yeah, and at the core of most of the music that I really connect strongly with is solid, strong songwriting, insightful songwriting. Songs that have something to say, whatever it's talking about. It's honest, it's true, it's real. And I would say that Avett Brothers are among those. They're really overlooked in a lot of ways for how sharp of songwriters they are. And I would say that their songwriting is some of the most personal that I hear coming out of really all of the artists that I love. And all the artists I love, I know from a personal place, and from but that their music, I think, tends to, and their lyrics tend to come from their own personal experience in a lot of cases, rather than borrowing upon or telling stories of others or inhabiting characters, which they do. Don't get me wrong, or narrating, a ballad, which they do. But a lot of the bulk of their stuff, I think, is very honest expressions of their experiences in life, and their confusions and their hang-ups and their victories and their defeats on a personal level. And the best example that I can give you for that is a song on I Am Lovin' You called January Wedding. Again, that was in 2000 and put out in 2009. And that song is about Seth Avett. He wrote it, although they get co-writing credit. They always list Bob Crawford and Seth Avett, Scott Avett as the writers, but it's really Seth song, and it's about his the wedding that he's preparing for him and his wife. That's going to take place in January, and he married in that year the love of his early years. This is his what would you call his high school crush, right? Some had been with him for many years, and they got married in January, and the whole song is about January we're getting married. And then I had some dates on here about this because I always forget these dates, but it was a couple of years. I know 4 years, I don't know exactly, but maybe somewhere around there. 4 years later, that they ended up getting divorced.
Bummer.
And Seth Avett, and there's a whole story behind this, and I'm not going to go into this story because, to me, I think this is more their story, and we don't need to talk about it here. But he ended up dating and then ultimately fall in love with, and now married and has a child with. God, what's her name? Oh crap! I swear,
Mrs. Avett.
She's the. She's the actress who played Dexter's sister in Dexter.
Really?
Yes.
Wow. Yeah, I know you're talking about. Yeah.
The name is escaping me, which happens
I will.
all the time.
That's a good show, man.
Yeah, she's a big fan. She's been at a few shows too. At any rate, so when is it on True Sadness?
Jennifer Leanne Carpenter.
There it is.
Deborah Morgan. Yeah, such a good show.
So on their new album, True Sadness, in 2013, he wrote a song called "Divorce Separation."
I just looked at that album track listing. I was wondering when you said that they got divorced if that song was about that. Do you have?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And importantly, they were, there are a lot of fans, and in any band is probably going to have this, and certainly when you get more popular, it probably gets more intense. But they have the people who are like fanatics, the people who are like everything Avett, right? That's all they listen to. They follow every show. They go see him. They'll drive 6 hours, and then the next week they'll drive 3 hours. Those people who are really
so
into
many
it,
Panic
right?
fans like that. It's
exactly,
insane.
And all bands have them to one degree or another, right? And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that there were a lot of people among that group who were very upset about Seth and his original wife getting divorced, and who said, for example, I can never listen to January Wedding again. I can't hear it. That kind of reaction.
Yeah, that's kind of almost like getting a tattoo of your and then later y'all break up and you're stuck with it. It's but a song.
Exactly.
And the fans are pissed about it.
And so, I guess I'm illustrating two things here. When he wrote Divorce Separation Blues, so there's a good kind of pairing examples of, how these songs are coming from they're very personal places, and very honest and out front in his songwriting. And I noticed in that song that he also seems to answer some of those people who, were very critical of Seth for hurting his wife in the way he did, and for how that all went down, and then for, as they would say, shacking up with, or, ultimately developing a relationship with Dexter.
Mrs. Carpenter.
Thank you.
Leanne. I forgot her name already.
Because he says in that song, well, neither one of us really want to head to town. We try to keep our friends at bay, try to keep the gossip down. Well, some folks just want the dirt and don't even care if it's true. But then again, who cares who's talking? I'm worried for myself and you. And I think in some ways that was a kind of a little nod to or statement to the people who had been vicious, as they will be on social media, in condemning Seth and and all the vile stuff that goes on those places.
That's like a sign of success when you choose to, like, this is kind of a common thing. I've seen artists, comedians, different people, they get to a certain level of success and then they can't read the comments anymore, because such a large sampling of people like you,
yes, that
even though it's like only maybe 10% negativity, that's still a lot of negativity. Absolutely. For as many people as will comment on like a Joe Rogan's podcast.
And the more famous you get, the more people want to tear you down, because we love to build people up, build our stars up, and then tear them down.
Yeah.
It's it's what we do. In too many cases.
Yeah.
At any rate, they're human, and that is very much obvious, not only on the stage and how there are. Even now, that they've gotten, a larger audience and are making more money and are more successful. Even now, they still are so humble, and I can tell they're so honest and they're so humble and they're so grateful, and so that's a big part, I guess, of why they have this broad appeal and why they appeal to me too. I like honesty and I like real music.
What?
Can I finish that song, by the way?
Yeah, no, definitely. I was going to ask you about some, if you had any other recommendations or other readings you want to do, just because you do have a keen eye for hooks.
Well, words, my thing, right?
I mean, they are by profession. I mean,
Yeah.
literally, like that's what you do. And two, I love how when you usually come on and do a reading or turn me on to a song, that there's always kind of like a gut wrenching hook of some kind in there.
Well, there's a couple songs if you would indulge me.
Yeah, no, go by all
entirety.
means. Just kind of.
But this one, I just thought, this divorce separation blues. It's so interesting. I'll preface this by saying that the album True Sadness, the title really defines that album very well, because that's what the entire theme of the album is. It's stories about divorce. It's stories about death. It's stories about missing your family. It's stories about, the fact that beneath the surface of the exterior that we present of ourselves, there is really in all of us, there's a real and a very true sadness to life, for any given reason, and probably multiple ones. And yet the music, and because you've listened to it, it's very upbeat.
It really
the music
is.
itself is very upbeat and it's very you can dance to it, and it's even the singing sometimes comes across as being very celebratory. Ain't no man can change me, right?
I was just looking at that title right here.
Yeah.
It's the first song on the album.
And I didn't think I got that lyric right, but at any rate, yeah, it's very upbeat. And yet, if you really listen to the lyrics, which are very strong in my opinion, the lyrics are talking about very sad and heartbreaking topics like divorce
and drugs eating in your car,
yes,
living on the road. Indeed. Not have I really liked a lot.
Not seeing your family, and you're missing life. And at any rate, I found this to be, and especially the way he delivers it, to be really well crafted. So he says, after that part about I'm worried for myself and you, he sings, I'm not going to sing it, but he sings, and I'll sign on the line beneath my name, the road is gone, I can't go back the way we came. They say one of every two, bound to be set aflame, every level of resentment, responsibility, and blame. Well, now I'm bound to break a promise, one I made to God and you. I've got the tough education, no celebration, divorce, separation, blues. I've got the tough education, no celebration, bad communication, worse interpretation, love deprivation, pain allocation, soul devastation, cold desolation, life complication, resuscitation, divorce, separation, blues. A yodelay.
He does yodel in that.
Yodelay, yodelay, yodelay. And I'm not a yodeler, but
that was
Seth,
nice.
I did not do Seth credit there, but maybe I did with his words at least. So I'll share something else with you about that particular album. But let me just ask you, man, because I burned all those albums for you, and I know you said that you've worn out the new one, but you kind of seem to connect more with the older stuff, with more of the raw stuff. And I could totally understand that. But yet you say you spin the new one, you find yourself listening to it more. So give me your take on the album as somebody who's fairly new to Avett Brothers. or relatively.
Yeah, it was. Like I said, I agree with people's statements that it was sort of poppier,
It is.
and too. So that might be like some sort of weird confirmation bias on my part because everybody I've kind of talked to about the Avett Brothers outside of you, friends, Colby, whoever, have just kind of been like, hey, yeah, they're just kind of like their old stuff. They're kind of poppy. That's the narrative. For me, I liked it. I listened to it a lot. It was in my car, so it would just come on like any time that I wasn't doing like streaming a podcast or YouTube or whatever. It would be on because I don't like to listen to the radio a whole lot. I mean, it just kind of
Never listen to the radio.
Man, the amount of commercials is insane.
I can't stand it.
Yeah, I mean that's why podcasts have commercials, but they hit them at the beginning or end, and it's not even a thing. There's no interruption.
And it's and that's a big part of it. But also just they play the same music over and over again.
Yeah.
I mean, I turn on a classic rock station or even just a kind of rock and roll bass station. It's like they're playing the same stuff that they were playing when I was listening to the radio in the 80s, when I was growing up. And I'm like, I mean, it's good music, and I don't dislike it, but it's just like I've heard this so much. I like to expand my horizons.
I would. I'm really fascinated that knowing about the Rick Rubin and that there's 4 albums only that
so far
that Rick Rubin did.
Getting ready. They said at the show that I went to on March 2nd that they're working on their 5th Rick Rubin album, and they gave the impression to me, they didn't say it directly, but they said we're closing this out in a certain way, and so it gave me the impression that maybe this was the final Rick Rubin album, that they're going to then finish that out and maybe go in a different direction. I don't know, but well, I mean, I don't know. What do you want to know about the Rick Rubin albums? I mean, I can talk.
Well, I'm interested to kind of cross compare the other 3 Rick Rubin albums to this one. I would just say this album more it seems to have it seems to fit better a commercial model than some of their earlier things. I guess you could say that. It was maybe there's a template of success that they came in, and whether it was a custom-made template for them or whatever, versus their earlier stuff where it was probably just them going in and saying, here's our stuff. Mm-hmm. And they didn't have that expert opinion to guide it. I mean, that would just be my initial thought because it does seem, like I said, their new album seems to fit a more commercial model than the earlier ones.
That's probably true. It's probably more accessible to a broader audience.
Yeah, exactly.
But it also is, if you can get beyond that, and the idea that it's, broader for more accessible.
And it's not even a point that hangs me up per se.
Oh, me either. I think, like I already said, I think it's some of their best work.
Yeah, especially lyrically. And thematically, there's some great stuff.
Like for example, "Satan Pulls the Strings." The first time I heard that song, I did not like it. I was like, "What is this? This sounds really popish." Yeah. And pop isn't. I don't use pop in a bad term, but pop-ish, I would say, is probably bad term. In other words, it sounds too much, too pop, too bouncy. I don't know. But I did not like it the first time I heard it. And then the second time I heard it, I was like, oh, I kind of see what they're doing here. And then the third time I heard it, I was like, I kind of like this. And then the fourth time I heard it, I was like, this is one of my favorite songs on the album. And I find that to be so true, not just with the Avett Brothers, but with music in general, that sometimes the songs that I don't really like at first are the songs that ends up being have staying power with me. And I think it might be because the first time I hear it, and this is a good example, that it's not what I expected to hear. This doesn't sound like the Avett Brothers. What is this? Because it's got at times a pop, but it's a very progressive kind of sound to it. Almost an electronic. I mean, there's a strong electronica element to it.
Yeah, they have delved in a lot of different directions.
Yes, and so when I first heard it, I was like, oh, I didn't get it because I didn't expect it. And then once I gave it time to simmer and really kind of settle in and really start listening to it, then I really started digging it. And that's kind of in a lot of ways what True Sadness in its entirety was like for me. First listen, I was like, I'm not sure about this album. second listen, I kind of see what you're doing, and so on and so forth. And now I think it's my opinion of it is some of their strongest work. You mentioned lyrically, some of their strongest work. My two favorite songs on that album. Let me find that one. My two favorite songs on that album. One of them is called "No Hard Feelings." Well, God, I also love "True Sadness," and another one is called "I Wish I Was." But I'll read those two in their entirety. But "True Sadness," I could share something, an insight about that. You remember I was talking earlier about their lyrics. Oftentimes I think I don't hear their name in the mix when I see articles about some of the best songwriters. I see Patterson Hood, show up there. I see Todd Snyder show up there. I see a lot of other artists. Isbell definitely show up there. But I don't often see people mention songwriting when they talk about the Avett Brothers. It's more about the live performance and their personalities and their connection to the audience and that sort of thing, and and also their kind of range of musicianship. I mean, Scott and Seth both are multi-instrumentalists. They could, if they had enough of themselves, they could play every instrument on the stage among the two of them. But their songwriting, I think, oftentimes gets overlooked, and it may be because of how personal it is. But for example, on "True Sadness," there's this one part of the song in which I call Seth the feminist. Every now and then, Seth's feminist side will come out, where he'll start talking about, or singing about, I should say, how women are too often defined in certain ways and judged and valued in certain ways, and therefore ultimately diminished in those ways. And so he sings, or he writes and sings. "Angela became a target as soon as her beauty was seen by young men who tried to reduce her down to a scene on an X-rated screen. Is she not more than the shape of her hips? Is she not more than the shine on her lips? Does she not dream to live and to sing and to dance down her own path without being torn apart? Does she not have a heart? How can I go on with this evil inside me? I step out my front door. I feel it surround me. Just know the kingdom of God is within you, even though the battle is bound to continue. 'Cause I still wake up, shaken by dreams, and I hate to say it, but the way it seems is that no one is fine. Take the time to peel a few layers, and you will find true sadness." To me, that's so true. And one reason that song appealed to me immediately on the album, even though it took me a while to warm up to the full album, is because I have said and thought so many times, about just how absurd it is sometimes. We meet each other in the hallway and we're like, "How you doing, man?" And you're like, "I'm doing fine." And you're not. And we all know nobody is. And that's the answer everybody wants. When they ask how you're doing, they don't really want to know how you're doing. I mean, take it for example.
Yeah.
Take an experiment and actually tell them truly how you're doing, and watch how quickly they try to get away. And so we just, "Oh, I'm fine." And the fact of the matter is, nobody's fine. Take the time to get to know someone, to peel a few layers. Take the time to really communicate with someone, and what you'll find is true sadness. And I think that's absolutely 100% life truth, and also essential in some ways, not in an everyday conversation way. That at times you do peel those layers and get to those places and deal with them. So that, I think, is a good example, in my opinion, of their songwriting strength that oftentimes gets overlooked.
Yeah, that is. I would agree. I mean, they're not really at the top. I mean, I like the lyrics of their new album, but they, like you said, they're not really mentioned at the top of the heap.
Yeah,
so to speak.
It's interesting. I don't know why that is. I don't know why. Maybe it's because the lyrics are so personal that they maybe. I mean, I know they connect to a large audience of people who love the Avett Brothers, but why they don't seem to get what I believe would be a deserved credit for their songwriting. Here's another one. One of my favorite songs on the album is also called No Hard Feelings, and it's a tough one because it's about imminent death, and it's about coming to terms with the fact that I too one day will die, and that's just a fact, you know. And we, not to get all philosophical here, but you know, I think we as a people, as humans, our tendency is to avoid that true reality of the inevitability of our own death. You know, and that's why I think we don't like to use that term death. We'll call
everyone
it
wants to go
away.
to heaven, no one wants to die.
True. Yes. Boy, good way to state it. Yes, exactly. So we use terms like passing away, you know, or going to a better place, or, you know, being called to heaven. You know, this one is really more of a direct statement of what he hopes will be his ultimate inevitability. And it's called No Hard Feelings. Let me make one more point about this before I read this song. You might have heard when I read those lyrics earlier, True Sadness, that he talks about the kingdom of God being within you, which is a very Christian concept. And the Avett Brothers are, to my knowledge, I've not met them personally, but they are Christian. And you hear a lot of Christian influences in their music. Mm-hmm. But if you listen carefully, you hear influences of Buddhism as well. There's a lot of Buddhist influences that they build into their lyrics, and it's oftentimes very subtle, and it comes up in this song, and probably the most direct way that I've heard from them. So their music, even though they consider themselves Christian, they're very open-minded about differing kind of religions and life beliefs and any kind of other belief systems, and they explore those in their music as well. It's a very interesting mix. But there's this Buddhist ideal. I don't pretend to be an expert here. You maybe have more of expertise than I am on this, but that to die a good death, to die a death that is one that you not leaving something undone, is to die with no enemies. And so if there's a saying, a Buddhist saying, I have no enemies. And what that means is that I am ready for death. When I die, if I have no enemies, then that means that I have succeeded in life. Okay? And if I have enemies when I die, then that means that I haven't, that I wasn't able to finish what needed to be finished. And so this song, No Hard Feelings, is about ponderings of death. It's again a Seth song. And it's really, he sings it, as you'll remember, and it's very fragile. It's just Seth and his acoustic guitar, and it's really personal. When my body won't hold me anymore, and it finally lets me free, will I be ready? When my feet won't walk another mile, and my lips give their last kiss goodbye, will my hands be steady? When I lay down my fears, my hopes, and my doubts, the rings on my fingers and the keys to my house, with no hard feelings. When the sun hangs low in the west, and the light in my chest won't be kept at bay any longer. When the jealousy fades away, and it's ash and dust for cash and lust, and it's just hallelujah. And love in thoughts, and love in the words, love in the songs they sing in the church, and no hard feelings. Lord knows they haven't done much good for anyone, kept me afraid and cold with so much to have and hold. When my body won't hold me anymore and it finally lets me free, where will I go? Will the trade winds take me south through Georgia grain or tropical rain or snow from the heavens? Will I join the ocean blue or run into the Savior true and shake hands laughing and walk through the night straight to the light, holding the love I've known in my life and no hard feelings? Lord knows they haven't done much good for anyone, kept me afraid and cold with so much to have and hold. Under the curving sky, I'm finally learning why it matters for me and you, to say it and mean it too, for life and its loveliness and all of its ugliness, good as it's been to me, I have no enemies. I have no enemies. I have no enemies.
Very nice, sir.
Tell me that's not poetry.
Yeah, no, man.
And it makes my mom cry every time, and I guarantee you she will listen to this because she listens to everything that I send her. Bless her heart. And so, sorry for making you cry there, Mom. But it's true.
You could always get a side gig just being an audiobook reader. Just do it.
Yeah.
No, you do rock the readings, though.
I thought about taking some of their songs, like I Had Loving You, and writing short stories from them.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Yeah.
Kind of interesting.
So let's. I want to ask you about this real quick, and then we got to wrap. I got to get to the gym here in a few minutes. Yeah,
we're gonna have to do an Avett Brothers part 2 because
let's do this. Let's do this. Let's do a part 2 and really hit on the concerts.
Okay.
Because we've done a good intro here, and let's just wrap it up with real quick about you getting these photos published.
Okay, right on. And then, all right, if you'll indulge me, we'll wrap it up with that. And then also with one last portion of a lyric from Talk on Indolence. So, at any rate, yes, I did. We'll talk concerts next time, but I've seen them 6 times, and the best show that I've seen of them, and when I say best show, I mean the one that really just will stick with, every moment will stick with me for eternity, was when I was on... it was at Cox Business Center in Tulsa in June 2014. So this was after the release of Magpie and the Dandelion. That's when they were touring on that, the third Rick Rubin produced album. And Connie and I were right on the end of the catwalk, right? So they have then they oftentimes have this, where they have the main stage and then they'll have a single lane coming straight out, right, into the audience. So there's your catwalk. And we were on the end of the catwalk because I'd seen him in Little Rock, and we were close to the catwalk, but that's where all the really intimate stuff happened, right there on the end of the catwalk. And so we were right there on the end, and Langhorne Slim and The Law opened for them, and I've got some great stories to share about that, including the time that when Langhorne Slim took my camera from me as I was videoing a song and scanned the audience with it and then handed it back to me. So I'll tell that full story next time. But I took several photos, and I just have a little point-and-shoot camera. It's what I use to take pictures at concerts and what I use to take my small handful of song videos for the shows that I go to. And it takes surprisingly good pictures.
It takes good everything. It's quality. I want to get one myself.
Especially with this one being that I was right there. So, quite literally, Brian, it was like I could look up, and they're just standing right in front of me, right? And so I got some awesome pictures, and I got 2 of them published in a publication called Stories of Music. This was volume 2. It's a book that's put out annually. This is the 2nd annual version of it. And what it is it's independent writings and photographs from all of music lovers, music makers, people in the business, people like me, who either, maybe short stories, poetry, essays, memoirs, in my case, photographs. And I took 2, I actually sent them 4 of my favorite ones from that particular show and sent it to them, and they published 2 of them, paid me $200 for it.
Nice.
I know, $100 a picture. So I can officially now call myself, even though it's only 2, a professional concert
you go to
photographer.
so many concerts, blogging, photos, stuff like that. I guarantee you, man, like with your videos, monetization of your YouTube channel, I'm all about it.
Yeah. Well, I love to do it. That's why I do it.
That's why I'm like bring those points up, is because if you can ever in any way do more of the things you love in life will be better.
Most definitely. Oh, if somebody pay me to go to concerts and give them a description. Hey, maybe somebody wants to go to a concert but can't and wants a full description with video and pictures. Pay me. I'd totally do that.
Yeah.
Unless the music sucks, and in which case I'm not interested.
Fair enough.
All right, so let's end on this then, since you have to be heading out here in a bit.
Yeah, so we'll come back with a part 2. If you're down to come next Friday, I'm down to have you in the house, sir. We can just do a concert review of your favorite moments, and then particularly the show you recently saw that I didn't get to go to that we alluded to at the beginning and midway through. So thanks for coming on, man. Wrapping it up. Yeah, go ahead.
With this talk on indolence thing, before if you have final thoughts to wrap
no,
up.
No, go ahead. I'm all done. So go ahead.
So we'll start where, or we'll end rather where we began, which this is the first song on Four Thieves Gone, the Robbinsville sessions. Robbinsville, sorry, I always say that wrong. Robbinsville sessions in 2006, and this is the one, if you remember, that has kind of one of the more strong punkish elements. This song is called Talk on Indolence, so I'll just read a portion of it. But when I first heard this song, it was just like, wow, because it's kind of what you might call cowpunk, right? It's got the banjo,
yeah, I've seen this,
video.
And
the acoustic guitar, right, and the kick drum and the hi-hat, right? And it's just this balls out, just celebration type song, right? It starts out like this. I'm going to try to read this in some ways the way they sing it. While I've been locking myself in my house for some time now, reading and writing and reading and thinking and searching for reasons and missing the seasons, the autumn, the spring, the summer, the snow, the record will stop and the record will go. Latches latch, the windows down, the dog coming in and the dog going out. Up with caffeine and down with a shot, constantly worried about what I got. Distracting my work, but I can't make a stop in my confidence on and my confidence off, and I sink to the bottom and rise to the top, and I think to myself that I do this a lot. And the world outside just goes and goes and goes and goes and goes and goes, and I witness it all from the blinds of my window. 3, 4, and then it goes into the song.
All right.
And I'm telling you, they get up there and they deliver that better than I even did, in just like this rapid fire of lyricism, and then this just it is drills into your brain in every great way. And when I first heard that, I said, yeah, these guys are someone to check out. So I encourage those listeners out here who maybe haven't checked them out to do so. Start wherever you like. Start with the latest album and see if you dig it. If you do, start working backwards from there, or if you want to look into their older stuff, pick up Mignonette or Emotionalism. And if you like those things, then start exploring from there.
All right. Excellent. Thank you so much for your time, sir.
Thanks for having me.
We'll see you next
I always
time.
love talking about music.
Hey, check out our Todd Snyder episode. It's been getting great feedback across the board. Drive-by truckers as well. We'll see you guys next time and for part 2 with the Avett Brothers.
Peace out.